East Hampton Town Board, we are live.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the June 13th work session of the East Hampton Town Board. Carol, would you please read the roll call?
Councilmember Burke Gonzalez.
Present.
Councilmember Lees.
Present.
Councilmember Rogers.
Present.
Supervisor Vance Goya.
Please join me in saying the pledge of allegiance.
Flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Today's work session will start with a public portion where any member of the public may address the board on any topic. We ask that you please keep your comments to 3 minutes or less. That will be followed by bids presented by purchasing department, Jeannie Carrozza, LTV Studios annual report, Michael Clark, Executive Director, discussion of the new tax law 466A, tax credits for volunteer ambulance workers and firefighters. We have Rob Connolly and our assessor, Jeannie Nielsen, here to walk us through that. We have draft code changes to chapters 160 and 162 for community housing, a draft of anti-poaching legislation. That's in conjunction with the trustee's attorney and our own David McMaster. Spring and summer seasons aquaculture updates. We have John Barley Dunn here from the aquaculture department who will walk us through that. And that'll be followed by liaison reports. And we do have a few resolutions, but first we'll get to the public comment. And we have one person signed up. I'll take by a show of hands anyone else who wants to speak. And then we'll go to the phones. Julia Kaiser. Good morning, Julia.
Yes.
How are you? Please come to the podium. Make sure you pull the mic down so that we can all hear you.
Yes, hello. My name is Julia Kaiser, and I have been a resident in East Hampton for over 30 years. I am very upset of the situation. I have owned a home in East Hampton since 1985. Now that I've reached the age of 95 years and do not drive, my children and great-grandchildren cannot go to the beach. My granddaughter spent many happy days here at the beach. When she was in college, she worked as a waitress during the summer here in East Hampton. Now my great-grandchildren, 1.5 and 4.5, cannot go to our beach. I pay the taxes all these years and receive no benefits from the town. I am sure that the town board can work something out. Well, I'll let you know what they worked out. If I want to have a family pass, I can pay $150. So I don't think it's right, but well, I guess it's like a holdup. I'll have to pay the $150.
So Julia, I appreciate.
I think it's not right.
Appreciate you.
mean, all these years and everything. It's just not the right thing to do. So I guess I have to go back here and write them a check, right?
The current process is that if you have a non-resident family, the current process is if you have a non-resident family member who wants to get a beach pass, then they would have to pay for it. It's a much reduced rate from a regular non-resident pass, which I think is well over, was it 500 and?
So in other words, I have to go buy a pass now.
For a non-resident family member, it's a $150 annual fee for that pass.
Right.
Now, I understand in talking to you before the meeting that I think your daughter had purchased one last year and actually only went to the beach once. So I can understand that the economics there are not really favorable. I had a brief conversation with the clerk, and I don't know if there's another way that we could structure this. But the problem that we have is if we issued a pass that you could just give to anyone for the day to go use the beach, that it's ripe for abuse. So, you know, it's something we can consider and look at and see if we can restructure this in a way that's maybe a little more equitable.
While I'm here, I'd like to tell you a good thing about East Hampton. They have the best senior services you could ever want to have. and I take advantage of that.
And I know you've also volunteered there quite a bit too over the years, Julie.
When
And
I was younger, I used to serve lunch twice a week at the senior center. And since the pandemic, we can't do any serving or helping out. It has to only be the people that are employed there.
understood. We appreciate all the time that you did spend as volunteer there. And I think the town board all agrees with you. I'm sure I can speak on behalf of the town board on this, that
Transportation is very good.
we have a great senior services program here and we're always looking to improve
Well, I guess
that.
I'll go back here and give them my charge card.
Okay. Thank you so much for coming in today, Julia.
Yeah, no, I know you're all busy running for office, but
Not all of us, not all of us.
I'm sorry that there's nothing that the town could have done other than this.
Yes, sir. In the back, will you please come to the podium and state your name for the record?
Hi.
Morning.
Thank you, everyone. My name is,
Just pull that up.
Oh.
Yeah, there you go.
thank you, everyone. My name is Alon Rosenthal. Hi, Kathy. I spoke with you the other day and I sent you an email. Appreciate the time coming in today. I'm wearing my East Hampton local optimist sweatshirt because I'm optimistic that you board will be able to help me with this. I want to become a resident of this town. I grew up here. I have a lot of roots here. I recently purchased a modest home. I'm not a billionaire trying to build a mega mansion. I'm also not a criminal, but the town has treated me like one. I applied for a permit in December to get my work done. I had made some repairs to my house, fixing the roof and some structural issues, and mold was getting into my basement. I had to remove a deck. I waited for my permit for 3 months, even though there's a town rule that says it's 15 days. I applied in December of 2022. In March, I heard, oh, a mistake was made on your survey and you're in a water recharge overlay district. My surveyor was LKMA, which is the same surveyor that the town uses. I have a local expediter. I have a local lawyer. Rob Connolly, who's the current town lawyer, was my lawyer at the time. I thought I had done all the research I could, but I was not aware that my house was in this water recharge overlay area. I called Natural Resources to ask because I wanted to put in one of those environmentally friendly septic systems. My home is called The Retreat, RETREET, because I actually care a lot about trees and the environment, and that's part of why I want to be a resident of East Hampton. As soon as I asked about the septic, they looked at a satellite image for literally 5 seconds, decided that my house was built in 1985, so it should have been compliant with the water recharge overlay district. They issued me criminal violations, which are affecting my job and my career and my mental health and stress, and they're withholding my building permit, which Joe Palermo is ready to issue today, but he's waiting to hear from you all about this. My home has legally pre-existing non-conforming clearing. Because it was built after 1985, it falls in some weird category, but I've presented the town attorneys. My attorney has spoken to them and given them evidence of the non-conforming status. I have several surveys that show the house when I built it had higher clearing levels, and I've presented town laws, including something from the town board where they amended last year in local law 2022-14. They amended building code section 102.7, which says that a clearing survey should not be required in the issuance of a permit. And when you're putting structures in a place where it's already cleared on a current survey, that the clearing calculations are not supposed to be required. That's exactly the case in my house. I'm not looking to build a new house. I'm not looking to expand it. I'm trying to finish my basement and renovate my home so I could be here and be a resident. I've done everything I lawfully could to apply for a permit and talk to the town, and I'm being pushed in circles, abused by the court and the town prosecutor, having criminal charges against me, which they keep on delaying and not removing. I've done everything I lawfully could. I didn't get the violations until the end of March when I had applied at the end of December for a permit. I don't think it's fair to treat residents this way. I think that you guys should work with them and talk to them and understand it. And my house has pre-conforming status, which New York State recognizes. So I'm here today to ask you guys for help to A, allow Mr. Palermo to issue my permit, keep it separate from my clearing issue, and B, work with me on my clearing issue and understand the non-conforming status of my home. deem the property as the legally non-conforming status, clearing, and then I will revegetate whatever is necessary to meet what was there, and I will improve it. The town has forced me to to deal with natural resources, who issued me the violation in the first place without even proper due process of the law. The town has they've been asking me to deal with them to revegetate to the current standards, which my house cannot meet. It's an irregular lot. It's not compliant with the normal A5 district. It has retaining walls holding it up. It's on a hill. Water is not even recharging on my house because it all goes down a hill. And there's retaining walls holding it up that count as cleared space. The Natural Resources Department, I don't know if they want me to remove the clearing walls or what they want me to do, but the undue delay on my permit is not only unfair and unjust, but it's causing great hardship for me. And I ask you, please, with great respect for this town, for you all, and for the trees and the environment, to allow my permit to proceed because it's a separate issue than the clearing, and advise Natural Resources to determine my pre-existing non-conforming clearing, and let me come up with a revegetation plan after they determine that, and don't keep forcing me to come up with the current plan. I did agree to extend my court date, which was yesterday, and I'm here for that. I've extended it for 28 days. I'm hoping that it could be resolved in that 28-day time. I don't want to have any legal issues with the town, but if it's not, I'm going to have to hire a different lawyer and decide on other things, because it's become an untenable situation for me, waiting months and months, and my home is in a precarious state.
So as I understand, hopefully I understand this correctly, you proceeded with work without a building permit. You were cited for violations, including overclearing, and the building inspector will not issue a permit until you correct clearing violations. Is that essentially what we're talking about here?
That's correct.
Okay, so I just want to make clear to you that the town board does not involve itself with the issuance of building permits. That is the sole jurisdiction of the building inspector at his discretion.
He's advised me to come
Excuse
talk
me
to you.
again, may I just finish? Sole discretion of the building inspector. You can challenge the building inspector's determination by applying to the zoning board of appeals and asking for relief through that route. I'm not familiar with your property exactly, but it is the jurisdiction of the town natural resources department to assess whether overclearing has taken place on a property. And, you know, we seek compliance, not punishment, if you will. So in many cases, if a property is overcleared, we seek compliance before issuing any further permits. So
I understand.
Okay. So as far as the town board's involvement, I appreciate you bringing this to us. You know, we can check status within the town departments, and
I think that the town attorney has had some conversations with some of you about this. I don't know if they were casually or formal or what.
I've had no conversation. As I said, I'm not familiar with your property.
The building department and the natural resources department have both advised that I speak with you in writing. They've said that it's up to the town board if we can issue this permit or not. I met with Mr. Palermo yesterday.
That's certainly not the case, and I'm surprised.
Correspondence to us?
Yeah, you have correspondence from those departments.
Absolutely, and just so you know, the town law requires that the building department reply within 15 days.
I understand the building department replies, but I have no correspondence.
For 90, and they haven't given me any objection or any denial. They've simply said, we don't know what to do about your house. It has pre-existing clearing. It's very obvious that this housing is pre-existing and non-conforming, and that they've done it. And the Natural Resources Department, respectfully, they are too busy. They've told me that they're too busy. They've told me that they're scared of you guys for what they're going to do.
I'm afraid I'm going to have to just say that the information you're giving me is so out of line with my experience with both the process and the departments that unless you have written evidence of what you're claiming.
Yes, I have.
If you have letters stating that they're waiting for the town board to intervene, I would like to see those correspondence, because that is certainly not the way this process works.
Kathy can tell you
now.
She spoke.
Now, I will say that the one exception is that the town board has authority to change the law.
Right.
But that's not for a specific property owner. That would be a broad and all-encompassing.
The town
so
board
if you're referring to So if you're asking us to change the law for you,
Yes.
that's one thing. But to say that the town natural resources department or the building department can't act because we need to weigh in is certainly, they can't act on legislation, but they certainly can act on the existing law. And it sounds like they have that.
Sir, respectfully, I've sent Mr. Palermo the town law in the section that I mentioned to you in the building department section. 1 year ago, this town board did change the law and they made a local law and they passed it and it amended the rules for building permit. And it specifically states that a survey showing clearing and a stake survey is not required when a home has legally pre-existing non-conforming property and when it's theirs. And when you're putting structures on an existing place that's already showed as cleared on a current survey. I've cited that law about 4 times to the building department. I understand what you're saying, and I don't agree that I shouldn't have to be here and that I should have gotten my permit already. And I wrote in the email to you that I don't understand why they're asking for the town board's opinion on this when there's already laws about this and when pre-conforming status is already a New York State law. The building department and natural resources, I promise you, have told me to defer to the town board. And
So
that's why I'm here today.
if you would just kindly give your address to my staff.
Yes.
And we can follow up. So because I'm going to want to contact both those departments and see
That would be
what-
great. That would
what
be
the
greatly
history is here
appreciated.
with this property on as to their interaction.
Just as a note, not just about me, about the town in general. I do believe that pre-existing non-conforming status is a right conferred by New York State. And respectfully, the department seemed confused about what to do when someone has that situation. And everyone, I know the building inspectors knew, he's very nice, but everyone is a little scared to do anything without the town board's consent. I'm just telling you what I've experienced. I'm not making this
So
up.
we can follow up on that. We
Yes.
appreciate you coming in and bringing it to our attention.
Thank you. I'll give them your number. And I've been stuck in this circle because of this, everyone trying to defer to you all. So your attention on it is greatly appreciated. I look forward to being a resident of this town. And I certainly hope that we can resolve this and that residents are treated the way they should be when something comes up and that given the answers and the time that the town code provides for. I'm very familiar with all of the laws.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Who do I give that address to?
The woman in the back of the room.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Very nice meeting you all. Thank you for everything you do for the town.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else in the room who'd like to address the board during public comment? LTV, do we have any callers on the line?
Yes, we do, and I'll transition over to that right now. Hello, caller ending 8764. You are on the air.
Good morning. This is David Buddha. First, I have to say that's a tough act to follow, but I'll try. I have 2 items to discuss with you today, but first I do want to express my best wishes for Sylvia's speedy recovery from whatever has disabled her from full participation in the work of the town board. First topic. My curiosity was piqued by resolution number 872, which is a budget modification concerning monies required for payment of insurance costs. The amount of the budget transfer is quite substantial, $280,000. I would appreciate as detailed an explanation as you are able to provide. Based on the clue that the budgeted funds are being transferred into unallocated insurance lines in the A and B funds and also into the general insurance lines in the highway department and sanitation recycling departments, I have to inquire if this large amount is being prepared to be paid out in connection with an insurance claim or accident payout that is not covered by liability insurance or workers' compensation. If you could either explain that resolution at this time or later when you consider it, it would be appreciated. I'm ready to move on to the second topic if you don't want to respond at this time.
Yeah, please continue, David.
Second topic is today's upcoming presentation concerning code changes required to try to unscramble the omelet that was created last year when the town planners and attorneys apparently did not fully appreciate that the long-existing Town Community Housing Opportunity Fund and the newly established Community Housing Fund are and must be kept distinct, and that the accounting for these trust funds must be kept separate and not intermingled. I reviewed the presentation posted in advance of today's meeting, so that gives me an opportunity to again thank you for adopting that process. It's very useful and helpful to me and all others interested in town government. I want to strongly state that the parenthetical suggestion on page 8 of the presentation that's marked with an asterisk that says perhaps the town board should also consider moving all of the code sections related to the new Community Housing Fund into Chapter 112, which is labeled Community Preservation, that simply won't work. Instead, I would suggest, as I have previously suggested, that you follow the model of the New York State tax law codification and create a new town code chapter which is dedicated to both the real estate transfer fund, both real estate transfer funds. As you know, there's a 2% previously existing real estate transfer fund, and there's a new 0.5% supplemental real estate transfer fund. There are about 10 pages of detailed provisions that are applicable to both the 2% real estate transfer tax that was created when the CPF was created, and the 0.5% supplemental real estate transfer tax that supports only the Community Housing Fund. Nearly all of these tax law provisions concerning definitions, regulations, imposition of the taxes, payment of the taxes, liability for the taxes, exemptions from the taxes, credits, handling housing cooperative corporation stock transfers, county functions, and refunds are identical to both taxes. The code provisions concerning the nitty-gritty of both taxes would be best handled in a separate town code chapter. It would be more efficient. I realize we're only dealing with virtual ink, so I'm not too concerned about, you may not be too concerned about spilling virtual ink, but it really would be more efficient to deal with those two tax aspects, which are very detailed, in a separate provision following the model of the state tax code. That would help the process of clearing up the town code governance of both funds. Thank you very much.
Thank you, David. With regard to the first question you had about Resolution 872, additional funds are needed to cover additional costs that are from adding new vehicles and equipment and rates that are slightly higher than what was adopted to be covered by the budget.
$280,000 is a big change. It just should be elaborated upon when you make that kind of significant budget change. Obviously something significant is happening, and there should be some better explanation as to why it's necessary to modify the budget to such an extent after the fact. I appreciate that.
I think I just elaborated on why it was necessary.
Well, it seems
Thank
like
you.
a big cost.
Thank you for calling.
I don't really understand it. You're welcome.
Thank you. We have any other callers on the line?
We have no other callers on the line.
Okay, we can move along with our agenda topics. And first up, we have Jeannie Carrozza, our purchasing agent for the town. Good morning, Jeannie.
Morning. So, a few bids, few notices. The first bid is the acceptance of East Hampton Airport mowing, and that's 2 times per the season. Suburban Maintenance and Landscape Incorporated is the apparent low bidder, $14,444 for both mowings for that one. Next is the Fort Hill Cemetery Interments and Maintenance Contract. Peter Joyce Seaside Landscaping and Pools Incorporated is the apparent low bidder for that. Total cost for 3 years is $83,992. First year being $27,040, and also interments are $1,100 each, and $500 per incomplete interments. Next is Springs Youth Association IA Sanitary Improvements. KJB Industries Incorporated is the apparent low bidder in the amount of $147,741. And then we'll have notices on for the purchase and delivery of toilets for the prison cells, drones for the police department, and pavement markings at the airport. And that's it.
Any questions for Jeannie?
No.
Thank you, Jeannie. Do we have Michael Clark on the line, LTV?
Yeah, he's in the waiting room. Let's get him in.
Okay, yeah, please. We'll go on now to the LTV Studios annual report. And we'll have Michael Clark, the executive director, joining us momentarily.
All right, I'm just placing on the first screen. All right, and let me just get this up and running over here.
There he is. Good morning, Michael.
Hey, how we doing? How's all the board members this morning?
Doing very well, thank you. It's good to see you.
Good to see all of you as well. Thank you, and a special hello to Sylvia Overby. If you're watching from home, Sylvia, please get better soon. We're thinking about you. I wanted to just throw that out there to get started, and also, I'd like to begin by giving you all a thank you for your suggestions, guidance, and partnership in all that we do here at LTV, especially Kathy Burke-Gonzalez, who's our liaison, as you all know. And, you'll see shortly that 2022 was a good year for us. But more importantly, it's basically a starting point for doing things a little bit different than we've done in the past. So, but always keeping the community in mind. So, that's what LTV is. We're community media, and let's move on to the first slide, Jason.
All right, give me a second. And okay, can everybody see this?
Yes, we can. Thanks,
All right,
Jason.
perfect.
Yeah, you can go actually to the very next slide. All right, here we go. Great, thank you. So, hang on one second. Let me get along here with you. So here's what we're going to address today. And please, along the way, please jump in with any questions or comments or, whatever you need. We're going to talk a little bit about what was the focus in 2022, a little bit about LTV in general, kind of what it is that we do, in case folks out there don't know, what it was that we produced in 2022, and then finally, now that the audit's complete, a little bit about the 2022 financial position. Next slide, please. Okay, our focus starts with the LTV mission. LTV provides a free speech television and media platform to share all manner of public communication, education, and creative expression within our community and the world at large. It's a little bit more than just the TV station itself. You got creative expression and a lot of the things that we're doing in a new way, such as, community theater, different events and those type of things, but we'll get into that a little bit more in a bit. So reflecting on 2022, it was really about very similar to 2021 as we come out on the tail end of the pandemic and the post-pandemic, as it were. It's about change because our business and everything that we do is changing every day. It's about being flexible and being able to provide for the community what they need. It's about being reliable and knowing that they can count on LTV to either project what it is that they want to project, or being the vehicle to do just that. And most importantly, and Jason's a big part of this, as you guys know, that technically staying one step ahead. The business and everything that we're doing with streaming and everything else is changing so quickly. It's kind of hard to keep up with, and I think we're doing a pretty good job of that, but more to follow on that. Next slide, please. So this is LTV for those of you that are keeping score at home and who aren't familiar with our organization. So this is who we are. We're an independent, not-for-profit, 501c3. We're not. A lot of people think that we are part of the town of East Hampton, but we're not. We're obviously supported in a huge way, both monetarily and with just guidance by the town. But we're an independent not-for-profit. We have a staff in 2022, we have a staff of about 11 employees, 5 of which of us, including myself, who were full-time. We own that big building on Industrial Road. It's a 2.5-story industrial building in Waynescott on property that we leased from the town, and thank you very much for that. We maintain a presence at LTV Studios, at East Hampton Town Hall and East Hampton Village Emergency Services Building, but a lot less than we used to. There's a lot of our things are, because of the pandemic and what it forced us to do, we're able to do a lot of the things remotely, and that's a good thing. It gets a lot more people involved. And we have a broadcasting reach at this time now from Quogue to Montauk on Channel 20 here in the town of East Hampton. So here's what we do. We broadcast 2 local channels, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We record and live broadcast government meetings and school board meetings for the town and for the village. And we offer public access show broadcasting and development for the local community. And we provide space for community activities, forums, educations, and this is where we really stepped up our game, I think, in 2022 in particular, and moving forward. Next slide, please. So what do? This is what we, as I mentioned, we have 2 channels. Okay, we have 20 and 22. Channel 20 is dedicated to public access, and Channel 22 is dedicated to education and government. So what do those two channels provide for the community in 2022? Let's start with Channel 20. On public access, here's what we were able to accomplish for the community. We aired an average of 130 hours of locally originated programs weekly and 45 hours of non-local programs weekly. That's a lot of broadcasting of what people want to say and getting their message out to everybody. We had 289 citizen-developed studio shows. That's up 81 over 2021, which of course could be expected a little bit because of the fact that we were coming out of the pandemic and it gradually increased and hopefully will continue to increase. We had 62 LTV developed shows. What that means is those are shows that we produce ourselves. We might see a particular area, for example, that we might need or we want to share information on. No one has stepped forward to do it from the community, so we take that on. We also co-produce with a few people if the situation is right. We have 12 community interns that were formally developed, and we're really proud of this. We actually have 2 intern programs working now at LTV. We have one that's called the Community Intern Project, which is 3 or 4 people that are given to us by East Hampton High School in this particular case, and there's mentors that give their time from the local community and kind of coach them through putting together an interview studio show on what's really important to the community. It could be affordable housing, it could be diversity, it could be things like that. So that's one section of our community intern program. The other section, it really takes place and starts next week, actually. In 2023. In 2022, it was the first time we did it. We actually had a former intern who was at LTV. We developed with her this particular program, and it went, throughout the summer. And we were able to develop interns that came to us coming out of college. When high school was actually from the age of 15 to 22. People that were interested in broadcasting, interested in the television, just really wanted to put themselves out there and get some training. And we did that and we'll continue to do that this year. We had 22 free production classes held with 33 producers trained. So that goes kind of in line with the citizen developed studio shows. In order to do a studio show, you take a production class with us that we give for free, just so you know what the ins and outs are of community television, and what you can say, what you can't say, and so we coach them through all that, and then once they go through this course, they then can have their own show. And if you're in the town of East Hampton, you're entitled to have your own show, and what you'd like to talk about is really up to you. As long as there's no hate speech, there's certain guidelines for community television in general, but it's basically your show. Channel 22 is our educational and government channel, as I mentioned. LTV aired an average of over 100 hours of government programming and 70 hours of educational programming per week in 2022. We had 294 government and school board meetings in 2022, and that's up 4 from 2021. And we produced and live broadcast the graduation ceremony of East Hampton High School, which has become the norm now. This is something that was started during the pandemic. Jason put together this amazing way of being able to do this, and which actually other people have called us and asked us, well, how the heck are you doing that? Now they want to do it every year. That's what happens when it goes well, I guess, sometimes, but it's a good thing. Now more people can view this. Like, for example, the first one we did, which was, was it last year, Jason? I think it was last year, right?
No, for the East Hampton High School?
Yeah.
Oh, that was that was, I want to say that was in the summer at the end of the school year for 2020. And yeah, that was a lot.
Yeah, it's got over 7,000 hits on it. People keep watching it, and family members and stuff like that. So it's a good way of getting that really important milestone in people's lives out to people who couldn't be here. And that's all on Channel 22. We hosted a lot of government events. Couple of examples. I know the board is all familiar with this. The South Fork Wind groundbreaking ceremony with Governor Hochul, Energize East Hampton forums, and so on. So, that's basically it. There's a lot more detail in the 2022 annual report, which is available. Will be available starting tomorrow, after this meeting, this presentation, plus the annual report. All the financial will be available on our website as well for a little bit more detail on production if you so desire. So let's talk about the audit a little bit. This is the 2022 yearly audit bottom line. So we're required to do this every year. We are audited by a third-party auditor. They check everything from HR requirements, payroll, and of course, all the financials. And it's a great opportunity for us at LTV to learn what went well and what we need to improve on. It's, every year we pick up a few different pointers, or, you might want to consider doing this versus that, and those things. These 3 bullets give you a high level of what they found. And so again, if you want to dive deeper with their full report and our annual report, again, it will be available tomorrow on the website. Or if you feel free to call me directly at LTV, I'd be happy to answer all the questions, once you review those documents. They're quite long, some of them. So basically, these are the 3 points that Sable and Oppenheimer made. And it's, as per se, the third-party auditor, LTV had an excess of revenue over expense of $180,000 in 2022. So this is an increase, great story. This is an increase of approximately $27,000 from the prior year. So that's a good thing. I'll get into a little bit more detail right after this on how that occurred. The second bullet is that LTV also, we increased our expenses by 27% over 2021, and they in their estimation, this is them talking, is mainly due to our LTV awareness program and necessary repairs and maintenance. And again, we'll dig a little deeper on this in a moment. And to be fair, in 2021, our expenses were down about 20%. And mainly because of the pandemic. So we're kind of falling back into the range of where we're supposed to be, I think, anyway. And this last one, I think, is the most important. It's that program expenses were 77% of the total expenditures. And what that means is that 77 cents of every dollar that we get is spent directly on LTV programming, and those are the kind of numbers that you want to see. So in other words, the money that comes to us from Altice via the town, that's where the money's going, and that's what they were able to determine by the audit. Next slide, please. Okay, so what were the major factors impacting those financials? So let's talk about revenues first. The contributions, so that means donations, sponsorships, underwriting, nearly tripled versus 2021, from 111,000 to versus 41,000 in 2021. That again makes sense because of the pandemic and kind of bringing us in line, but was able to really up our revenue stream in 2022. Our studio rental income was up by about $75,000, and that was helped along by a nice two-week commercial rental by a relatively famous musician who was kind of using it as our giant Studio 3 as a place to rehearse for his upcoming tour. And so there was a good amount of that rental income came from that, which we don't get every year, unfortunately, but onward we go. So let's talk about the expenses. What are the major factors impacting the financials? Our wages and compensation was up by about 100,000. And, in my mind, that makes sense. We're doing a lot more. We started doing a lot more in 2022 with community activities and things like that. We need people to do it. So, we did bring on a couple of people more hours for the part-timers that were here, and it did increase our wages, for the year. Our production expenses were also up by about $20,000, and that also makes sense because of the fact that we're doing a lot more. There's a lot more put into people being here, managing what it was, and those expenses go up. And then our advertising went up by about $40,000. This is the awareness program that I was talking about earlier. What this, we were able to determine that, there were so many people in our community that simply didn't know what LTV was about and what it was that we could provide for the local community. So we really upped our advertising budget to try to drive home the message and be involved in the community in ways that would make people see what we do and what we can accomplish. And I think that proved very successful because you see the contribution numbers being up in such a high level than they were the year before. So people were taking note about what we're doing. We got more people reaching out to us and actually saying that to us, that we like what we're doing, we like what we provide, and we like to be involved. And a lot of them, not a lot of them, but some of them wanted to be involved by donating and sponsoring and underwriting, and that's a good thing. So that advertising or that awareness plan, will continue. That's continued so far the first half of 2023, and we think to good result. Also, the expenses, we really started focusing on our capital plan. Peter, you were the one who actually pointed this out to us a couple of years back in developing a comprehensive capital plan that could really lay out over a 5-year period what we needed to do. And that was very helpful. And so now we have, and we really just started last year and it's continuing well into this year, of what we need to do. The building has aged out, and so much of the equipment that was here aged out. And I'm talking about, roofs and air conditioning and, all the things that aren't sexy, let's say, but that have to be done in order to provide what we provide for the community. So that was really, really helpful. But you'll see, well, maybe by the next slide, of what the focus was on. So Jason, if you could put that up, please. So this is the LTV capital plan. I don't expect people at home to be able to see this, and you don't really need to, but just to show you, this is a, kind of an idea of what it is that we're doing. Up at the top, we have the plan, 5-year plan. You'll see 6 columns here because we really just started in 2021, didn't really do anything. So we've kind of, moved things out, and that's what the red arrows mean. But these are major things that, we saw that were aging out in the building, and it's stuff that I'm sure that you folks deal with on a regular basis over there at Town Hall as well. Things like the air conditioning systems and the roofing and appliances that were here for kitchen shows and lighting and sound systems, and things were just aging out, and especially with our production equipment, with the way that our business is changing so rapidly, keeping up with the Joneses, if you will, trying to replace those things. So 2022 was a start of that. And, you can see by the column there in 2022, some of the things that we focused on. One of them we had to move over to 2023, but the ones that are in green there, the Studio 3 lighting and sound equipment in 2022, we were able to accomplish that by getting a grant in order to do that. And we have similar things happening in 2023. And then underneath at the bottom, you see what the major capital upgrades that we've been working on since 2020. We've kind of listed them, and this is for my own benefit, kind of a checklist on what's coming and what we've done and been able to accomplish. Next slide, Jay. So it kind of leads us to where we're going. And you'll notice a typo on, excuse me, a cut and paste error, I shouldn't say a typo, on the very last one that I spaced out and sent just yesterday, but I'll talk to it in a second. But the first one is continue to take government meetings to the next level. This is, we're always looking at the technology improvements. Jason keeps me on my toes with that, and then the continuous employee training to change with the technology. There's a tremendous amount of training that goes into all the new systems and things that are doing. So we need to focus on that in order to make sure that we're able to broadcast what it is that we do, in a professional manner. As I mentioned, we're going to continue the LTV awareness program. LTV is UTV. It's kind of our mantra, this is the community's television station. And, we encourage people to make it your station, get involved. We have volunteer opportunities, obviously, donations and sponsorships and being involved at the station in that way. And then, all of the community events that we're doing, like all these community theaters, come out and support them. We had a great, this past weekend, the Indigenous Fashion and Film event, which was really neat, seeing these, the Indigenous community is part of our community too, and seeing what it is that they bring to the local community and reminding people that that's there. So we have a lot of those type of things going on. Diversity and improving our diversity at LTV has been a big focus for us as part of our strategic plan. I mean, not only people that work here, our staff has now become much more diversified. Our board has now become much more diversified. And what it is that we're putting out on the channels has as well, and that will continue with our involvement with OLA and other groups around. We are trying to drive that message. So the continued LTV awareness is going to continue on into 2023. And then we're going to continue to try to create opportunities to bring the community together. As it says there, through arts, discussion, debates, education, we feel that we can continue to make a real difference for the East End of Long Island. And we're going to continue to do so, again, in bringing these small things like not small things, but things like South Fork Performing Arts and our Fabulous Variety Show will have a show here this weekend, and then 2 or 3 throughout the year, and South Fork as well. And now, bringing Josh Gladstone onto the team to help us, drive other theater type of things to our community. And, are we trying to be the next Guildhall? Are we trying to be the next Stephen Talkhouse because we have bands here or something? No, those things are irreplaceable. You don't try to do that, but we're trying to focus on what things are community based and really can set the message and bring more people into the building who have never been here before. And so far we feel that that's kind of working out. So we'll continue to try to create those opportunities in 2023. And, things that are happening moving forward, just started already in June for the rest of the year. It's actually pretty incredible. We're pretty busy. And the last one, continue to focus on the capital plan. And there's the cut and paste error, right? Cut and paste from the one up top, but really what it means is we're going to upkeep on our production tools that we need for the business and on the building, including the replacement of anything that needs to be replaced as our budget will allow, is really the key to our success. It really had been let go a little bit too long, and we're playing catch up a little bit, but we think we're on a real good path to make that happen. So I throw it out to you guys to a couple of questions or comments. Or
Thank you, Michael, for the presentation. I think it's really helpful for us and for the community to really appreciate what LTV does, behind the scenes and what all is going on. I'll turn it over to board members if you have any specific questions about the programming, about the annual report, about the finances.
No, I just wanted to say that I know Michael said he's going to be posting on the LTV website, just so folks at home know. We've already posted the 2022 annual report, the financial statements for the audit, and the 2023 budget overview. This is all part of the agreement we have with LTV that Michael will come on and give us a presentation each year. And those documents are already available online on the town's website. Did we lose Michael?
Thank you.
Oh, okay.
No, he's there, but we're on now.
There he is.
For myself, Michael, I think what's very nice to see is working through the pandemic and to make sure you show the community that there's the media opportunities of using LTV as a support system, but also as a platform, but also the physical space that you provide. I'll be there tonight. I'll be there pick up on Friday, and I'll be there on Saturday also, as you're mentioning. So having that, which allows the creativity of our residents and specifically young children then too, it's been wonderful to see that being morphed and even used more. So congratulations to yourself and the staff for that.
Well, thanks so much, Amy.
I'm going to add that being a liaison to 2 citizen committees that have been the benefit of your new technology and your new programming, both the Litter Action Committee and the Energy Sustainability Committee through Energize East Hampton, and how that has impacted community engagement and got the messages of littering, anti-littering messages, which they're going to come in for a wrap up and see what they produce with the help of LTV.
Yes.
And also all the informational programs on electrification, EVs, et cetera, that we're able to get out to the community. It is really helpful. And watching how your new technology has increased the communication ability is amazing. And I thank you for all that you're doing.
Well, thank you, Kate. I appreciate that. And you know, the bottom line is that we're the vehicle to get it out there, right? That's kind of what we do. And the great thing is that, you know, for example, like the Litter Committee and, you know, and some of the others, the Energize, East Hampton, for example, you know, that these things are happening. And you know, there's so much, you know, it's really an awareness campaign for everything that happens in the town. And, you know, that's kind of what we're about and that we're focused on. So thank you very much for the kind words. Appreciate that.
So Michael, I'd just like to say that I'm extremely proud of what LTV has done over my tenure, the 12 years now being on the town board, how much LTV has evolved and adapted, increased its proficiency, its excellence in programming. And from my standpoint, in my humble opinion, I think LTV is the best public access television station, bar none, from what I've seen traveling around and watching public access all over when I'm on vacation or happen to be traveling somewhere. It's really extraordinary what LTV brings to our community. Some of the other board members have hit on that, you know, between the government meetings that you broadcast, keeping the general public aware of what's going on in their local government, school board, committees, you name it, covering of community events. I just want to give a quick shout out and thank you, LTV, for providing the historical film loop here at Town Hall this past Saturday, where members of the public participating in the fair could come in and watch historic events and learn about our local history here. So thank you again. You know, you've always been so accommodating to us and to the community. The vast repository of historical archives that you have, I think it's over 25,000
Correct.
Different tapes of everything from historic interviews and past community events that you have. It's such a great resource. Lectures, I was watching a really interesting lecture that I wasn't able to attend at the library the other day, the New York Botanical Garden.
Yeah.
The director there talking about invasive species. It's just such a great educational aspect. So really proud of the strides that you've made and how much you've progressed and grown. And we really are so lucky and benefited by LTV. So thank you for giving this annual report today. And
thank you, Peter.
We look for the rest of the broadcast.
If I could just say one thing, you know, as liaison now to LTV, I mean, under Michael's executive directorship, you know, the LTV is very professionally run. They have a very strong board led by John Olkin as the board president. That you touched on, Michael, that, you know, you're working through a strategic plan. I know I saw on Instagram that you opened up Studio 5, you know, so there's an expansion plan as part of that strategic plan. And we're just, you know, grateful for everybody volunteering to be on the board and the leadership that you and John have provided.
Well, thank you, Kathy. And just one other point, if I could touch on real quick, and I was I just didn't mention it, was the partnership that we've gotten into, and Peter, you reminded me of this, of, well, you know, with the 25,000 tapes. You know, we're not in the archive business, but the library is. So we've gotten into a kind of a partnership with them in digitizing all of those things and letting them be available to our local community just by going to the library and being able to get those out. So Dennis will be making an announcement about that in September, about it being, but we're almost there and getting everything digitized. So if you want to go in and just look at it, you know, you can just go in through the library and it's all going to be housed in a way that's it makes sense and the right people are managing it that should be managing it. So, forever, these things will be saved. So it's great.
It's great.
So, but thank you very much, all of you.
Thank you very much as well, Michael.
Okay, I'll talk to you soon. And Peter, I hope to see you for your show when you retire.
Okay. You may see me before then. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see how that goes.
Okay. Talk to you soon. Thank you, everybody.
All right, thank you. Next up on our agenda is a discussion of the new tax law 466A, tax credits for volunteer ambulance workers and firefighters. And we have Rob Connolly, our town attorney, and Jeannie Nielsen. Welcome, Jeannie, to give basically an overview on this. Essentially, New York State, I believe, has made changes in the law that would allow for local municipalities to adopt legislation that would allow for reduction of the number of years required to participate in fire departments and ambulance services in order to qualify for up to a 10% tax exemption on their property taxes. And with that said, I'm just going to turn it right over to you, Jeannie.
Yeah, I mean, it's really kind of short and sweet. The state changed this 466A to allow for a 2-year volunteer active member of an ambulance firm or a fire department or a fire company to get this exemption. We did have it at a 5 and a 20-year. So for retired people that still live, that serve, they would retain that for life, which was always in the law. So the 2-year is a really good addition because I think it's really reaching out to help retain membership in these departments. And hopefully that will work. East Hampton has always been at a 10%, but I believe the law may have opened it up around the whole state for everyone to do 10%. Suffolk County, I think, was pretty smart and started that much earlier than others. And the other addition is that they are going to allow fire districts and fire companies to adopt the 10% on their levy line as well, which I would believe they would do. I've contacted all the fire departments by email to inform them of this, and I'm going to inform all the school districts about the 2-year.
Have you had any direct inquiries or asks from the local fire departments regarding this yet? Or
just
any
Amagansett.
Mm-hmm.
So that's been passed on to all of them now. So by resolution, they can opt in.
I think having this as maybe an additional incentive to attract volunteers is important. I know all of the departments, fire departments and ambulance corps are struggling to attract volunteers. It does take a fairly substantial commitment in order to get the training necessary to be able to provide those volunteer services. And any way that we can help assist supporting our volunteer services, I think, is important for us to do.
That's true. And the key is home ownership, as we know. And
housing affects, housing is the lack of housing. The cost of housing is affecting every aspect of our community. And this is one of the most troubling aspects is that it's impacting the ability for first responders to be able to live in the community that they would serve. And in my mind, there's nothing better than volunteers, a volunteer service, people who are really doing it for the love of the community and for altruistic reasons. It's not just a job. It's so much more than that.
Yeah, and the main criteria is home ownership to get the exemption.
Right.
So although there might be a lot of members in the department, they can't even reach for this until they are
Well, they actually
homeowners. So yeah,
own a home. And
But it's primary home ownership.
primary, it must be your primary residence. Yeah.
correct.
Yeah.
Are there any questions or comments from board members?
Well, so if the board is supportive of this, Rob has made code changes to our current code. And if you want to take us through that, Rob, and so that we can get this noticed for public hearing.
Sure, it's
Chapter 255, I believe.
225.
I'm sorry, I said 250, it's 225.
I just clarify what the purpose of the law is, recognizing that the state legislature has amended section 466A. And then the other changes are really just in 225-26 in paragraph 4, changing the service time from 5 years to 2 years. And again, in paragraph F, instead of having it read any other law, I'm just reflecting the change in Article 4 of the state real property tax law. But those are really the only changes. They're minor changes, but have significant consequences potentially.
Yeah. So Becky and I were just discussing this. Do we need in E where we have that the is it E where the incorporated volunteer fire companies, fire departments, and incorporated volunteer ambulance services shall file lists of their enrolled members? Should this say on an annual basis, should there be a date, by January 1, July 1?
Talking renewals?
Yeah, so that
Renewals
because
are by March 1st for the exemption, but
So that's true with the STAR exemption, any of the exemptions? They're all on the same calendar schedule?
The
or-
basic STAR, you don't renew that. And the enhanced STAR, the state basically has taken over the administration of all STAR exemptions. So that's income-based, and yeah, that's a yearly renewal. So this also is a yearly renewal, but once you reach the 20 years of service, you don't renew.
You don't need to renew, it's a standing exemption.
But it's a March 1 taxable status.
Okay, so I guess the question to Rob is, do we need to incorporate something in there or
For the renewal?
or put a March 1st,
March 1st.
put a date that it's,
Yeah.
so that folks, the
Yeah, I mean, that's.
fire companies know when they have to notify us by.
Yeah, because right now on the last sentence says taxable status date on a form.
Yeah, so March 1st is that date every year.
And then I know that we've heard from the East Hampton Village and they're supportive of this legislation as well. So, Rob, if you could, after the meeting, let us know when you could get this on for public hearing, that would be great.
I can make the change today and
Oh, good. So we could notice it on Thursday. Perfect.
Sounds good.
Thanks for bringing this
you,
to our
Jeannie.
attention.
Thanks,
Jeannie.
everybody.
Thank you.
Next up is the draft code changes, chapter 160 and 162 regarding community housing. We have our housing director, Eric Chance,
Hello, everyone.
here with us today.
Hi, Eric.
Good
Eric.
morning. Good
So-
afternoon, I should say.
I'm going to run through a quick PowerPoint presentation. It's not an overly complicated or involved issue, but it is a big problem for our new community housing fund.
Eric, could you pull the microphone on the desk closer to you?
I will, but I'm going to go to the podium.
Oh, right on. Thank you, man.
It's working? There we go. Okay. So what I'm going to do is go through the existing code sections, explain this to you, but basically the problem that we have right now is that we need to keep the Community Housing Opportunity Fund, which is an older fund, and the new Community Housing Fund, which includes the 0.5% transfer tax, as separate funds. So basically, when the transfer tax legislation was adopted, we combined the CHOF, as we call it, the Community Housing Opportunity Fund, and the new Housing Fund. It made sense because why have two separate funds or code chapters for two programs that essentially have the same purposes? I'll go into those purposes in a second. But basically, as you might suspect, providing affordable housing and community housing throughout the town. What we did was we consolidated and the code was amended to have one fund that was identified as the Community Housing Opportunity Fund. However, we cannot transfer money that we're collecting through the new transfer tax to the Community Housing Opportunity Fund or any other account as per the enabling legislation, which was the Peconic Bay Region Community Housing Fund. So basically, how we set this up in the code doesn't reflect how we need to set it up financially as far as our accounts go. Thank you. Yep, thanks. So basically just giving you a little brief history here. The Community Housing Opportunity Fund has existed since 2003, so for 20 years. Everything else you see here relates to the new Community Housing Fund. That began as a vision in 2021 when that legislation was put up for in Albany. In November 2022, as I think everybody, all the town board members remember, there was a public referendum that year with as an election year, and the community showed strong support and voted yes for participating in that fund. Quickly thereafter, the town board moved to adopt the code changes in order to make that fund and program a reality. And basically, as of April of this year, the town can begin accepting monies from the Community Housing Fund, again, the 0.5% transfer tax for providing community housing. So basically, we're in a situation today where that money is beginning to become available, but we have a situation where, that I'll get into in a little more detail, where the way that we've set up the code, we can't transfer that money into the account that we want it to be in under the law. So just briefly, this is kind of a breakdown of the difference between the CHOF and the CHF. Again, the Community Housing Opportunity Fund and the Community Housing Fund, which is the new fund. But basically what you'll see here in this side-by-side breakdown, although the CHOF was adopted 20 years ago, the town was forward-thinking in that respect, and the CHF was just adopted last year. The purposes and uses are essentially identical. When you go through the enabling legislation, it basically lists everything almost verbatim. And basically that's loans to first-time home buyers, building community housing, maintaining community housing, housing counseling services, and then the purchase of land or buildings for community housing. With the existing CHOF, that is the main and really only use that we've had of it. I say only because I don't want to marginalize the importance of that. But we mainly use that for our affordable home ownership program. So we have, as you know, but the public may not, the town owns the underlying land of a number of properties throughout the town. Most of them are in Whalebone Woods, around Whalebone Village, Kingstown North, Green Hollow Woods. And the town, in their agreements with the current homeowners, has an option when they go to sell the home to either recoup a certain percentage of that home sale and put that back into the fund to provide affordable housing, or we have the first right to repurchase the home so that we can then continue to make it available to people in need throughout the community. So that right now is mainly what the CHOF, the Community Housing Opportunity Fund, is used for and has historically been used for. The balance of that fund, just so you know, right now is around $1.5 million. Obviously, you look at that's a large figure, but when you consider the cost of homes and land in the town here, that fund is limited in the number, in the reach that it has and the scope that it has and the number of homes that can be purchased, kept in the system. Obviously, that was the impetus for adopting the new Community Housing Fund with the transfer tax, is to have the funds available to do more, and we need to do more. So also what you'll see here when you look at this side by side, the sources, the funding sources for both of these funds are also basically identical with one key exception. So basically both funds can be funded by the general fund, from standard taxes that the community pays, gifts, grants from the state or the federal government, money that we recoup from home sales or rent that's collected from homes that are within the town's ownership, or interest on fund monies that are already in the account. The big difference here, obviously, is that the CHOF, the previously existing fund, is not enabled to take money from that 0.5% transfer tax. So that's the key difference here between these two funds. I just wanted to give you a comparison and briefly explain the difference between the two. So again, the purposes and uses and the sources of money for the CHOP and the housing fund and the new community housing fund are essentially the same. The key differences are there's some extra limitations on loans for first-time home buyers. They're not significant. They more specify the rules for loans to first-time home buyers. And then basically the main thing, as I just said, was that the new community housing fund can accept funds generated by the new 0.5% transfer tax. The CHOF, the Community Housing Opportunity Fund, cannot. And then a key thing to remember here is that neither the CHOF nor the new housing fund can transfer money out of their respective accounts. So once you've put the money into that account, it has to be used for one of the approved purposes, which all relates to providing community housing. You can't placehold into, so I mentioned this because we can't take, if the new housing fund can take money from the transfer tax, we can't take it and put it in the housing fund and transfer it into the CHOF account and then back and forth. You can't do that. Once it's in the account, it's in there. And right now, again, reiterating, under our code, the one fund is the CHOF. So we have money sitting around that we can't put into the fund as it's codified. So we basically just need to correct that within the code. And this is basically just a breakdown of how we set up the code. So again, when we adopted the code changes very recently, the new chapters and the new chapters for the new community housing fund, we consolidated the CHOF with the new fund and placed the elements into two chapters of the code. Chapter 160 had existed at the time. That was solely the CHOF, the Community Housing Opportunity Fund. We created a new chapter, 162, which was basically to have some separate provisions for the new community housing fund, things that were unique to that fund. Again, the idea here was, well, we have two funds for basically the same purpose. Why not combine them? Why would we have two parallel funds? Let's consolidate it. It makes sense at face value. But basically, this is just an overview of what you will find if you look in the code today, if you look in chapter 160 and 162. Obviously, I didn't want to go through the whole code here. But basically, you'll see in 160, it gives some purposes and definitions. It has that as at the beginning of both code sections. Most of the, if you call it the guts of the new community housing fund, was placed into chapter 160. It also talks about the establishing an advisory board, the requirement of a housing plan, the purposes, the permitted uses of the fund. But again, this was lumping everything and grouping it all together. The other thing too is that Article 2 of 162, again, that was set up as unique to the new community housing fund, all relates to the rules and regulations for the transfer tax. So basically, this is the way that your code is today. Again, this is a problem. But basically, the way that the code is set up today did achieve that goal. It consolidated the CHOF and the new CHF into one fund, which is now called the Community Housing Opportunity Fund. However, again, we can't transfer money that we're collecting from the new transfer tax into the CHOF account, and we can't transfer money from the existing CHOF account, which again is roughly about $1.5 million, into any new account. So basically, the way that we set it up doesn't work. These are the things that happen when you're writing code, when you have new legislation. You have to work out the kinks of it, but we started to realize this almost immediately. I thank Becky Hansen in finance of the town for really waving the red flag on this pretty early so that we can address it. But basically, the bottom line here is that we have to undo what we did. We can't combine these two accounts. They need to remain separate accounts. So basically, the proposed solution is taking 160, which again is the Community Housing Opportunity Fund, and reverting back to the original CHOF, Community Housing Opportunity Fund. I would recommend a few exceptions, but again, the key point here is we're basically just undoing that combination, going back to chapter 160 as it was verbatim before the new housing fund came along. The only changes I would recommend to that is that has provisions that establish an advisory board and require a housing plan. I don't see the reason to have two separate advisory boards and two separate housing plans. Makes no sense. So you will see draft legislation of code changes that will include basically a provision that just says in the CHOP section and chapter, which is 160, when you get to advisory board and housing plan, see the new, the new housing plan section. These shall be the same board and the same housing plan. But basically, that will now separate the CHOF from the CHF. And then there is, I'll get to this in a public comment related to this. You do have some options of where you put and how you separate the new community housing fund. But our early recommendation here would be the Chapter 162, which was the new chapter created in response to the new fund. Place all of the new code sections related to the new housing fund verbatim in the new chapter. So basically, like I said, right now, some of those regulations are spread out between 160 and 162. I drafted up some code changes. You'll see a more formalized version of that, but I took everything verbatim, unless otherwise noted. So all the details that were spread out that relate to the new fund, just take them verbatim, reorganize them in a new section away from the CHOF, and that includes the purposes of the law, definitions, the code section establishing the fund, the permitted uses, rules for the advisory board, the housing plan rules and contents, and the rules for village participation. Again, all wording and verbiage that has been adopted by the town board, just taking it and reorganizing it into a section away from the CHOP so that we can separate those two funds and begin transferring money from the transfer tax into the new fund. Again, this would achieve the goal, which is separating the two funds. The other thing that would need to be done is that in Chapter 112, which is community preservation, that is in the code where all of the details regarding the larger CPF fund, water quality improvement, that's where they live currently. They should stay there. There's a couple of little sections that need to be revised because they say as outlined in Chapter 160. So you just got to re-reference that to wherever we put the rules for the new housing fund. And then also in speaking with the town attorney's office, Article 2 of Chapter 162 is all about the transfer tax rules. That is probably best put in the section of community preservation that has the other rules regarding transfer tax for the regular CPF. But another consideration, and that I've been speaking with the town attorney's office about, specifically John Jilnicki, though, was maybe the town board should actually consider, instead of, you don't technically even need a Chapter 162. If you revert 160 back to being the CHOF and have everything unique to the Community Housing Opportunity Fund, CHOF, in that section, you could take all of the new legislation, again, verbatim of what was adopted, take it, group it, and put it at the end of Chapter 112. That is actually what Southampton Town has done, if you look at their code. And that's what we did with water quality improvement when that was adopted. So that would still achieve the goal of keeping the funds separate. Again, it's up for debate, but that's the main goal here, is just to separate those two funds. So basically, as you would anticipate, the next steps here, the town board should just have a discussion of what the proper reconfiguration of the code is. We, Housing and Community Development, in collaboration with the town attorney's office, recommend basically what we just said, which is reverting the CHOP back to the old code verbatim, with those little changes of the advisory board and the housing plan. Create a new code section, whether it be Chapter 162 or otherwise, for the new community housing fund. Have all of the details of that in one section. And then also you might want to consider, instead of having that in a new code section 162, putting that at the end of Chapter 112. Once the town board has this preliminary discussion and we have some guidance, the town attorney's office will craft the standard format you see for code changes, bring that to you, and then we can hold a public hearing and hear if there are any comments from the public on that proposal. So.
Thank you, Eric. From my standpoint, I'd like to see us consolidate the number of code sections that we're dealing with this. I'd like to make sure that it's clear and that there are distinct lines drawn as part of what we're doing here. And I think that's really the impetus. So clearly designating a spot where the money can land and where the code section should reside. I mean, I favor reverting CHOF as you've described, chapter 160 back to the way it was before. And then I think the board should at least consider looking at placing it in 112 where we've placed our community water quality, CPF water quality legislation as well. I do think it's necessary to refer to the committee and the plan in the original CHOF. So to add those so that we're just dealing with one committee for housing, it doesn't make sense to me to have two. But entertain discussion, comments, questions from board members.
I just thank you, Eric, for spelling it out, because prior to putting this PowerPoint together, it was a little confusing as to what, our options were here. And I agree with you, Peter. I think it makes sense to put the code, let's be consistent. If we're putting water quality in chapter 112, Community Preservation Fund, we should put the housing piece there too.
We discussed this with land management also with Scott Wilson. Eric,
I'm sorry.
has this been brought up with Scott also?
Yeah, we had some preliminary internal meetings when this red flag went up, and Scott has been involved. We've discussed it with planning too, with Jeremy Samuelson. So we put heads together, and I don't know of any department that has any objection to moving forward.
Yeah, this is really the result of those internal meetings and preparing to bring the options before the board.
I agree. It makes sense under community preservation rather than another code section.
So we did have a caller today who was talking about another section of the code. I mean, might be helpful just to take a look at that and see if that's applicable, pertinent, or whether that's something the town board may want to consider as well.
That was more about templating it to the New York State.
Understood. I just, if you want to take a look at that, Rob, and just weigh in. You can do that via email to board members.
Eric,
go ahead. Go ahead. No, I was going to ask if there are any more questions or comments.
It's timing looking to move this ahead for, what's our timing right now?
ASAP, I think.
Yeah.
It's the short answer.
Yeah. Notice Thursday?
I don't know if we could. There's a lot. There's 3 notices, right? You got to notice 160 changes.
Mm-hmm.
I guess you delete 162.
I would prefer if we can do it all on Thursday, because the time, by the time you have the public hearing and everything, we need a place to land the money that's going to be coming in. So we should try and fast track that to get it noticed. I know it's addressing 3 different sections of code.
Could we notice on Tuesday, since we have a very long time frame there until our first July meeting?
Well, I can't make any promises because it's not so much up to my department.
Town
really
attorney's office will have to prepare their.
Thursday, we'll get it done for Thursday.
Okay, great.
That'd be great because we have that one less meeting in July as well.
Right. Any other questions or comments on this topic?
No.
Thank you so much, Eric.
Thanks, Eric.
And that brings us up to our next topic, which is the draft legislation regarding anti-poaching. And just as a matter of background, the last couple of years, the town has been dealing with, I guess, what should be characterized as an organized crab crime ring, poaching of crabs, particularly in Georgia Pond. This has, caused some alarm, and the incentive to adopt measures that will disincentivize and really address this problem in a significant way, because this is the aggravated taking of shellfish, if you will. And we have David McMaster here, and we also have the town trustees attorney, Chris Carrillo. Chris, nice to see you. Nice to see you at the Blessing of the Fleet, and Captain Vinny as well.
Thank you, Peter. Yeah, it was nice to see everybody at the Blessing as well. It really is a great event every year, and
absolutely
every year you get the chills when they read off the names of the ones we lost, and you respect for the fishermen, the boating community, and it's just a great time to remember why we all live here. So yeah, it was great seeing you there as well.
So as the supervisor indicated, I'm David McMaster. This is Chris Carrillo. And these are changes to Chapter 213 of the Town Code. Chris took the lead in drafting these. I'm going to assist with the administrative end of preparing it in minute track. And obviously, we're here today to seek feedback from the board members on the language and the wording of the resolution. But I'd ask that we focus on the substance of it. I think everything that's in here is correct. The one thing that I will add that should be changed is that in subsection E, penalties and offenses, that's actually going to read unclassified misdemeanor instead of a C misdemeanor.
Okay.
And we're looking to, make this punishable by up to 30 days in jail as well. And with that being said, I will let Mr. Carrillo take the board through the specifics of the legislation.
All right. Thank you, David.
Thank you, David. Just to back up briefly as well, we met with Tim Treadwell and a number of the trustees. Peter, you did a nice job of just kind of explaining what we've been seeing over the years, which is some sort of organized crime, not only in Georgia Pond, but also in Napeague Harbor. I know some of the trustees have witnessed it, some of the Lazy Point residents. I know Tim and his staff have had some issues over the years with vans full of non-resident people coming at night, vans and trucks, 4, 5, 6, 8 people taking bushels and bushels of shellfish out of Napeague Harbor and exporting them somewhere west into Nassau or Queens County. And so the goal was between Tim, myself, and the trustees, and try to come up with a list of items that we can include to update the legislation into an aggravated taking of shellfish. Some of the issues that Tim had noted were when he comes across these people, if he attempts to stop them, no IDs, unable to keep their names, and then because it's just a violation, it's not an arrestable offense. So the goal is to kind of pinpoint these types of takings that are happening, include them in an aggravated offense type legislation, make it an arrestable offense, and then sort of give it some more teeth as far as the fines, the jail time, and the unclassified misdemeanor. So I think, again, as David said, although I practice law, I don't draft legislation often. We'll let David sort of hash out some of the language as far as changing that as we need to. But the nuts and bolts here are sort of 5 points of the aggravated taking. The first one, subsection 213, 10QA. This is going to be with people that are unlicensed working as 2 or more in concert. Of course, part of this existing legislation shows if you're licensed and you're a commercial or recreational harvester, of course you can go out with your family or your friends or your employees on your shellfish boat working as 2 or more. But if you're unlicensed, you shouldn't be working together to take even more shellfish. So that was the first way we noted that we're able to sort of hone in on this issue, is the 2 people working together without licenses is really how they're able to take so many shellfish out of our waters. The second one, subsection B, is the utilization of some sort of lookout or watch system, which Mr. Treadwell has noticed several times in the last few summers, which is there actually is a lookout posted either with a different vehicle up near Route 27 or somewhere else on Lazy Point Road. And then using either a phone, cell phone, radio, some way, they're alerting these people who are out waiting around in the waters that here comes a Marine Patrol, and they all seem to sort of scatter off into the distance. So using that lookout system, if we can find a way to reel that back in, that's going to be under subsection B. Subsection C, just your attempt to flee, when that's another thing that's been occurring, is people wade further out into the water, they disappear into the woods. So not that they're even being detained or arrested, because we already have that in other areas of the code. If you're attempting to flee an arrest, that's one thing. But if you are fleeing in the act of taking shellfish, should be another arrestable offense or aggravated offense. That's under subsection C. Subsection D is going to be between the hours of sunset and sunrise. So if you are licensed, if you're a licensed fisherman, there are already in the code a number of types of fisheries where you're permitted to operate at night. But if you're unlicensed, then you should not be out there in the middle of the night poaching our shellfish. So fairly simple, subsection D there. Operating at night without a license is going to be an aggravated taking of shellfish. Lastly, commercial purposes. This one's a little bit more difficult to define, because who's to say you're taking shellfish either for yourself or for sale purposes. So we tried to hone in a little bit on how you can define commercial purposes. It is defined already in this town code, but we utilize kind of two different ways to further on that definition of commercial purposes. The first one, if you're in possession of 2 or more times the recreational limit of any given shellfish, that can be deemed commercial purposes. The second one is going to be if you're in some way found exporting these shellfish out of the town of East Hampton. That would be another way in which you would determine these are commercial purposes. If you have 2 times the legal limit, or if you're exporting shellfish illegally, that's going to be commercial purposes. That's going to trigger this aggravated taking. And then as far as the penalties for offenses, we're going to again lean on David a little bit and his expertise in drafting legislation and understanding of the criminal code. But the unclassified misdemeanor does make it a arrestable offense. Does be, if you're found guilty of it, it's a crime. It's on your criminal record. And then of course you could increase the fines, which are kind of up for discussion as well. This is sort of just a template, but increasing the fines right now, I think it's $100 or $150 fine. When these people are able to take these shellfish and sell them for thousands of dollars further west, the $150 fine does not seem to have nearly enough teeth. So starting around $1,000 and then increasing is one way we can do that. And also open to any suggestions. These are just some of the ideas that myself, the trustees, and Tim had thrown around, sort of a working draft. Happy to take into account any town board input, and David and I can work together to clean this up and have it ready as a sort of a final draft the next time we meet.
Great, Chris. Any questions?
No, I mean, I'm supportive of the 5 points as you spelled out. I had a conversation with David earlier. Some of these double negatives make it a little challenging to decipher. So you had said earlier, David, that you're going to just clean up the language a little bit. So that's fine.
David, does changing it to an unclassified misdemeanor, is there an opportunity for vehicle seizure?
So the law of criminal forfeiture.
Yeah, please come to the podium, David, for that.
I think generally the rule of thumb in criminal prosecutions is that the instrumentality of the crime is subject to seizure. I'd have to look into it further if it's specifically subject to forfeiture, which probably not, right? I think so. It could be impounded and then used as evidence in the prosecution. The short answer is I'd have to probably not, but I'd have to look into it specifically and get back to you. It's more something that's used for like drug crimes or other where the car is the instrumentality of the crime. But we can certainly get back to you with a definitive answer.
Thanks.
My last things, I think, Chris and David, what you just mentioned, particularly Chris in there, is you pretty much painted the picture of what's happening out there in the middle of the night and where most residents don't see it. And what's happening is that we're losing one of our most cherished resources out here in ways in which it provides habitat. They provide food for individuals. There's recreational value. They provide clean water. This is a lot of our shellfish out here. And I think it's shameful that this come to this right now, that we are dealing with individuals that think they can perpetrate our town waters on a regular basis without any immunity. So I know this has been brewing and bringing this up. I know Peter started discussing this last year. I look forward to seeing this move forward as soon as possible.
Thanks, David. And then Kate, just to go back to your point as well, that was something we had tossed around in our work sessions as well, as far as, can you impound the vehicle or the boat? I think we'd like to get David to look into that a little bit more as well, because I think that's another tool that could be really ussul. Tim had mentioned that just as far as a logistical issue, it was going to be challenging for his Marine Patrol with limited staff to, in the middle of the night, with multiple people scattering around, probably be a challenge to impound a vehicle. But I agree with you. I think if it is something that we find that we can do within the confines of the law, then we should pursue that as well, whether it's the vehicle to escape with the shellfish, or maybe they start to use boats, because that could be on the horizon as well. Smaller boats could be shipped in. We saw some people on boats with the Lalago squid in Montauk as well. So something to keep an eye on, and I agree with you. We'll try to hash that out too and see if we can.
Yeah, also any of the fishing equipment. I mean, I would imagine that's part of
clam rakes and all of that. Yeah.
all of that stuff. I mean, I think it really sets a firm deterrent, as well as I think this is very good and much needed.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'd just also just like to state for those watching who may not know, Tim Treadwell, who's been referred to several times, is our Chief Harbor Master and in charge of Marine Patrol.
So as far as timing, when would the board like to have this back?
Right away.
Thursday?
I would like to notice it Thursday and have a public hearing for the first one in July, so we can have it enacted for this season.
I mean, we're in
Absolutely.
the season now.
We absolutely are. Chris, I appreciate your participation too, as well, and just partnering with the trustees to protect our natural resources from the unlawful exploitation is really important, I think, to all of us here.
Mr. Supervisor, I think that with some of the changes that we're going to make, it might need to come back for one additional work session first, because the language that's in this isn't exactly going to be what's noticed.
Well, it'll be in the notice. I think that's sufficient. I don't think what we've discussed here is nothing's drastically different than what we have had here. So I'd like to see
All right,
this
we'll notice it on Thursday.
notice right away.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Town Board. Appreciate it. Have a good day.
Thank you, Chris.
Take care, Chris.
And that brings us up to our last agenda topic, which is the spring and summer seasons aquaculture updates, kind of apropos of what we've been talking about, ensuring proliferation of bivalves throughout town waters and protecting the crustaceans as well is important to us here. And John Barley Dunn, who's Director of Aquaculture, is leading the forefront of helping us maintain healthy shellfish stocks. And you have a report for us today, Barley.
Yes, good afternoon. Thanks for having me. And I'm really glad to hear that your folks are cracking down on poaching, because it's and a lot of those things that were mentioned sound like a really good deterrent. Hopefully that'll make a big change. I guess I should have brought that raw bar after all, huh? Everybody hungry?
It is lunchtime.
David mentioned it. I thought I was joking, but that'll come in handy right now. A little snack. So yeah, our season, here we are in June, halfway through the year. Most of our spawning is done. So for those that don't know, we start spawning in February. We do a few batches of oysters, a few batches of clams. We've got a few batches of bay scallops under our belt. Most of the animals are at the nursery. The scallops are still out at the hatchery. We're actually going to start transitioning those to the nursery tomorrow. So fingers crossed for a good transition. The cool weather helps. Scallops, as you all know, are super sensitive.
Mm-hmm.
We've got a nice crop going at the hatchery, but moving them from Montauk to 3 Mile, the nursery, the 20 miles can put a hurt on them. So with cool weather like this, that always helps. So we've got a nice crop of clams and oysters at the nursery, as usual, numbering well into the millions, and we'll continue to cull those down based on growth and space and size. What else? We have the oyster gardening program is going strong. We have about 120 oyster gardeners, Peter being one of them. This weekend is a big weekend. We're handing out their seed, their new baby oysters, which will be about 1/4 inch in size. We have about 24 or so new gardeners, and some of those are growing on their own property. We have about 4 or 5 folks in 3 Mile Harbor alone that are going to grow on their own property. So that's great. The more of those we can get, the better. So just for anyone listening at home, if you have waterfront property with a dock or bulkhead, or if you're in the lake and you have underwater land, you can actually grow your own oysters. So the way the gardening program works is East Hampton residents can pay a fee. They get a cage or 4 bags, get 1,000 oysters, grow them out, take them home and eat them whenever they want them. And that's how it works. Everybody gets into the water, meet some like-minded folks. And this time of year, where the water is relatively cool, we haven't broken that spawning temperature yet. So that everything is really fattening up, getting ready to spawn. It's really amazing eating right now. Like I said, that the natural spawn hasn't happened yet. We haven't had that 70+ degree water temperature that'll cause everybody to spawn. So that should probably occur maybe next week. You know, this water is relatively cool. Yesterday afternoon, water was still 63 degrees. Today, I think we broke 70. So waters are slowly warming up. Sugar kelp, we've been growing sugar kelp during the winter. As you know, that's a winter crop. our idea is to grow some sugar kelp and help pull some more nutrients, excess nitrogen out of the water. And some of our best spots, well, we've tried pretty much every harbor in town. And some of our best spots have been Shipyard area right behind Springs General Store, growing some really nice long kelp blades, and Hog Creek. So the theory being that those areas with a lot of excess nutrients are really the best areas to grow sugar kelp. Other areas that just doesn't stick. Slipgut which is a winter weed. It sounds just like it is. It's a slippery filamentous algae that is a common winter weed, and that kind of takes over all the other sites, and the sugar kelp just doesn't stick. We're working still with Stony Brook University on a lot of projects. There's a PhD student named Chris Bionic who's studying he's looking at different oyster strains, where they come from and how well they are resistant to diseases, how well they grow, and trying to kind of nail down how the genetics of oyster lines affect how they survive and grow in different areas. So we're working with them. We work with a lot of the students in the Gobler Lab. Anybody who's really doing shellfish projects, they generally end up using our product because they don't really have their own hatchery. So we kind of joke that, when they take our stuff, they're figuring out how to kill things based on, whether it's ocean acidification or predator experiments. So they work with a lot of everything from day-old eggs to overwintered seed. They're playing around with, seeing how they survive predation and survive our acidified waters. We started a shell recycling program with South Fork Sea Farmers and SeaTuck and a whole bunch of volunteers. There's a trailer up at Gann Road. It's got a very obvious banner on it. So anybody who eats shellfish at home, if you need a place to dispose of your shells, cruise up to Gann Road and just dump them right into the trailer. And we'll take them out to Montauk eventually and cure them for 6 months to a year, and then use them in future oyster restoration projects.
So Barley, can you just describe that process of why old dead shells are important and how that actually works? A little bit more detail.
Yeah. So the way we operate, we produce two different types of oysters, basically. One is a single shell, what we call cultureless oyster. So it's an oyster that once they set, without getting into the weeds of the process, once the oysters set to the bottom and cement to a substrate, the way we generally do it in the hatchery is we set them on little tiny pieces of culch so that they end up as a single oyster. Another method, and mostly for reef restoration, is to make a spat on shell oyster. So what we do is provide large bags of shell, whole shell, and we put those into the tank. And then when the oysters set onto those, we end up with many oysters set onto one big chunk of shell. So this is what we call spat on shell. And they're in bags, mesh bags, and they're often used for oyster reef restoration. And I'll get to more oyster reefs in a bit. But so the shell, the most preferred shell, and if you really think about it, it makes sense, is oyster shell, because the way oyster reefs were established was oysters continually setting on oysters over thousands of years. You end up with this huge mound of oyster shell, some dead, most alive, those on top. And so oysters have evolved to prefer to set on oyster shells. So they will set on other shells, surf clam, hard clam. We try not to use bay scallop because it's so brittle. Those shells just fall apart. So if anybody, we prefer to recycle oyster shell, hard clam shell, and surf clam shell if you come upon it. So those are the shells that we're looking for to be donated to our reef pile. And we'll put them to better use than if they end up in the transfer station. They work fine in your compost too, but if you have extra, we're glad to take them and we'll put them to good use. And so also, speaking of South Fork Sea Farmers and LTV, I just wanted to mention that we've been utilizing LTV, and it's a great station. We've been putting on some informational panels. Everyone from Carl Safina, conversations with Carl Safina, local artists like Jody Kukier, Meredith O'Leary, Chris Paparo, the fish guy, Pete Malinowski, Billion Oyster. We have these 1-hour shows with LTV. I think we're up to about 24 of them. So if you go to the the LTV website or the South Fork Sea Farmers website. And on the South Fork Sea Farmers website, there's also some videos about oyster gardening. Some of the lectures and presentations I give about shellfish biology and how the hatchery works. So LTV is a really great resource. So I just wanted to give them a shout. They're amazing. The oyster reefs. So last year we built, along with South Fork Sea Farmers, we built the first one in Trustee Waters. That's in Accabonac. It's right around the corner from Landing Lane, between Landing Lane and Shipyard. And 2 students from East Hampton High School, Sky Tansman and Nick Cooper, were involved with that. And they actually have been really shining a light on Bonnet science. They attended the Long Island Science Congress and the New York State Science Congress. They won some awards, and they're starting to put Bonnet on the map on the science front. And also I want to mention that Stephanie Forsberg is now over at East Hampton High School, and she's going to be, she's got shellfish in her blood. So I'm really looking forward to more high school projects with her in the lead, and that'll be great. We have an intern coming up, Jocelyn Garcia. She's going to work with us with the oyster reefs, and she's off to Shoals Marine Lab for a 2-week stint this summer. She'll be back soon to help with the oyster reef projects. And we're working with Friends of Havens Beach. We're hoping to help them get an oyster reef inside Sag Harbor's breakwater. So we're working with the Village of Sag Harbor, the harbor master, to get that going, hopefully for next year, once the permits are in place. And staffing, we got a great staff.
I'm so sorry, I'm new to that one. That sounds interesting. So working with the municipality of Sag Harbor Village to do an oyster reef inside that area where there's been historical bad runoff and bad water quality.
Yeah, so Friends of Havens Beach approached us, and they're concerned with Havens Beach. They want to try and clean up that water as much as possible, and thought an oyster reef would be a good way to do it. So we took a little boat trip around the breakwater and determined some good areas to possibly drop some of these shell bags that I mentioned. And we're talking, we're going to work with the harbor master. And it turns out that the village is basically in charge of that breakwater. So once we have their permission and get an area established, since it's the town of East Hampton side, we figured we could help them out with that. And like I said, next year, hopefully get a reef established. And there is natural, for those that have snorkeled in that area, there is some natural oyster set on those rocks already. So this should just add to that. And we think putting it on the inside will help larval retention and help enhance some of that natural oyster set. So that'll be fun. Staffing, we have Ava, Marissa, Sam, and Jeremy hard at work. Some of them are up at the nursery right now, some are at the hatchery, and then Chris Gray is our part-timer. He's the guy that helps out with the oyster gardening program, so he'll be on this weekend. And I'm starting to secure some volunteers, helping to put together bags and bag this shell that we're talking about for oyster reef construction. And that's about it. We're looking forward to another great season.
Harley, if you needed, anyone wants to volunteer, how do they contact your department?
Yeah, good question. Send me an email at jdunn@ehamptony.gov or phone call 631-668-4601. And you just need to fill out a few bits of paper and we'll put you to work. Mostly outdoors, so you get a tan.
Thank you, Barley, for continuing to, produce the shellfish here for the town and ensure that future stocks will be healthy. There are so many benefits to shellfish, and you've touched on them. There's economic, cultural, gastronomical, and ecological. And I think people, if you think about it in a way, the shellfish really are sort of like the lungs for the water body. They're filtering and they're keeping that water pure and taking up excess nitrogen and keeping the balance of our harbors and creeks in the right place, which benefits everybody, and recreationally. Obviously, you can't go into water that's contaminated with harmful algal blooms. Shellfish are a great way to help prevent harmful algal blooms. So we face a lot of challenges with the environment, and you mentioned ocean acidification. Our water is becoming more acidic due to the burning of fossil fuels and the deposition of excess nitrogen from atmospheric sources, which is a little more difficult. It's a more global kind of impact, whereas locally we're addressing the impacts of nitrogen in groundwater by encouraging people to upgrade their septic systems and reduce those impacts. So, the effort that you're putting forth and all of your staff is really important to that overall health of our local environment. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's kind of an out of sight, out of mind thing. We always talk about planting trees and how the Amazon rainforest is the lungs of the planet, but a lot of people who don't spend time in and on the water don't realize that we need this habitat and these shellfish out there to help keep these waters clean. And as you've mentioned before, without these clean waters, we don't have much of an East Hampton or Southampton or North Fork. we need them all.
Also, just reminding people that 95% of those atmospheric greenhouse gases end up in our oceans and waterways.
Mhm.
So that makes the helping out by filtering so much more important.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you to your staff, Barley. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Thank you, Barley. See you at the garden.
Yep.
Okay. That brings us up to liaison reports. Kathy, you have a report for us today?
I do. Starting with the new senior center, I just wanted to remind folks that there's going to be a presentation to the planning board Wednesday, June 14th, beginning at 6:30. As I understand it, it'll be the first topic on the agenda. R2 is going to be presenting remotely. I was planning to attend, as is Diane Patrizio, our Director of Human Services. And folks can find the presentation on the town website under planning board agendas. Moving on to the Montauk Playhouse, it looks like we're getting everything set up to go out to bid on that project. This afternoon, I'm going to have a resolution to hire McLean to review the building plans and specs that are being developed by the Playhouse's architect and engineer. And at next Tuesday's work session, folks from the Montauk Playhouse Community Center Foundation will make a presentation on the floor plans for the first floor aquatic center and the second floor multipurpose cultural center. And then we're scheduled at the Thursday, July 6th town board meeting to accept those plans and specs for the finished aquatic center and a rough second floor. And, again, once we get these plans, then it'll be in the hands of Jeannie Carrozza, our purchasing director, to get this notice so that we can go out to bid on that. So that's an exciting project that's really gearing up. Another project that's happening right here on the Town Hall campus is the Change Hampton working on the community pollinator garden. They're calling it Roots in the Ground. They're going to have a big push on Saturday and Sunday, June 17th and 18th. We're expecting the plants to be delivered this Thursday, June 15th. They're going to be bringing in a porta potty on Saturday morning, the 17th. They've asked to have access to 4 folding tables, which I was going to reach out to Parks and get that arranged. But they have asked for access to a storage space so they could store tools and materials. And I'm not quite sure if we have the ability to do that.
I wonder if we have any space in a Cassone trailer that we might have on property, or those full. I guess we check with buildings and grounds and see if there's an empty container or something we can.
We'll do that.
Bill.
And so they're asking folks to, who, if they want to volunteer to help with the planting, to come on down on Sunday, June 18th for a community planting bonanza. It's what they're calling it. And I know I ran into Aubrey Peterson on Sunday at the Montauk Mile, and he said that they were offering, obviously, community service for not only the student, but if they bring a family member, they get the family member's hours as well. So,
double.
yeah.
Excellent.
East Hampton Housing Authority, great progress actually is being made on the affordable housing project on 3 Mile Harbor. All the buildings are in place, and once they are complete, the landscaping will begin. So they're still looking at an early 2024 completion date. The East Hampton CAC had met last week, and we covered a lot of ground. There were concerns regarding the traffic patterns in and around the Springs Fireplace Road corridor since the MTA raised the trestles. I mean, we addressed this by amending the code on Accabonac with putting in weight limits on the lower portion of Accabonac. There was discussion that there's also an issue on Town Lane, and would the board consider weight limits on Town Lane from Accabonac to Abraham's Path? And we also heard from community members about a month ago about West Drive and Morris Park Lane, how that's being used as a cut through for large heavy trucks. And so I'm hoping it's something that we can address. We could probably, we're planning to have a draft of the final report of the Springs Fireplace corridor presented next Tuesday, June 20th. And I think that this may be something that really wasn't an issue when we launched the study, but it may be something that we need to address. When Lisa LaCory, Peter Flinker, and Ray Tobias make a presentation on the 20th. Other things that we've talked about at the CAC are about the placement of gas cans on landscape trailers. This is being witnessed by folks that are concerned that, landscapers are filling up, the gas cans and placing them on their trailer. And sometimes folks don't even see the trailer that's being pulled behind the truck. So they asked, they wanted me to look into it. So Kevin Cooper did some research and learned that gas containers carried on vehicles and trailers are regulated by the New York State Department of Transportation, that these containers and any other containers on a trailer or a vehicle cannot exceed 400 pounds in material weight. So the way Kevin interprets this is that they can fill up as many OSHA-approved containers as they want, as long as the total weight of the canisters are under 400 pounds. The DOT law also states that the containers must be properly secured. And DOT looks at this as, materials of trade. So I shared that with the committee, and I've also reached out to the chief to see, because code enforcement can't enforce it, but can the, town PD enforce this on behalf of the Department of Transportation. So I'm waiting to hear back on that. There's also concern from the East Hampton CAC about the parking for the convenience store on North Main Street. There's very few parking spaces there, and we're finding that some cars are parking actually on the sidewalk, and it was witnessed that one car drove on the sidewalk to get onto Springs Fireplace Road. So I was going to be bringing this up in tomorrow's enforcement meeting that we're having. And then lastly, a member brought up the synchronization of the traffic lights on North Main Street, requesting that the timing of the lights be visited. And then lastly, I just wanted to remind folks that this Monday is, we're going to be celebrating Juneteenth at Herrick Park. This is brought to the community by the Calvary Baptist Church, the East Hampton Anti-Bias Task Force, East Hampton Village, and the town of East Hampton. It's Monday, June 19th, 12 to 4. It'll be led by Reverend Walter Silva Thompson Jr., members of our local clergy, and guests, as we discuss this important time in our history. There'll be food trucks, a band, and we invite the community to come on down and participate and learn more about the history of Juneteenth. And that's what I have for today.
Thank you, Kathy. David, do you have a report?
Yes, I want to let everyone know that all regularly lifeguarded beaches will be open 7 days a week per this coming Saturday, June 17th. All recreation department programs, depending on which day of the week they run, begin on June 24th.
Registration for these programs are available online on the town's website. And we are also happy to announce that the town now is going to be offering open water swim training for those 18 and over who are looking to expand their swimming skills in open water and train for triathlons or open water swimming events. Training will include skills for improving open water safety, drills for improving basic stroke technique and efficiency, open water swim starts, and sighting. Sessions include both distance interval training. The program is only available for those who are able to swim at least 500 yards continuously. Please contact our recreational rec department at 631-324-4141. I want to let everyone know that the Stephen Hans Path Drainage Project is pretty much complete except for demobilization. They'll be continuing to water the plants and also maybe some more native wild seed mix might be sprayed into there, but it's pretty much complete. I haven't seen it during any rain as of yesterday. Again, this is a phased approach. This is the town's aspect of the project. The state will be looking to expand the intersection in the coming winter. Second House Road, we've actually got back to Second House Road roundabout. DEC permit has been approved. So we're going to finalize and move that into final engineering also, just to give everyone the heads up where that states as far as that progress there too. Lastly, just talking about Highway Department. Highway has been performing cutback of vegetation around infrastructure. That meaning they're cutting back vegetation that's overhanging from private properties or even public properties onto sidewalks and into road right-of-ways that might affect sight lines. Private property owners have a duty to remove that vegetation or to keep it cut back safely, or the town will be removing that for our public safety aspect. I want to let everyone know that Nature Preserve Committee did meet last week. I had to take it remotely, but mostly the discussion there, we had discussion about continuing bamboo on town properties. As the board knows, we did remove the bamboo on the Maloney property, and it is a multi-year approach to it. But we're seeing that on other properties now that we are inspecting more regularly now that we have a new land steward also. So we're going to be asking to come up with a new practice for removing bamboo, continue on that. I know we discussed it last week, but I want to continue on this. Chapter 167-4E, the town code. This deals with littering, and specifically in quasi-public places. This section of the code states the owner or person in control of any building or lot shall be jointly and or severally responsible for keeping the sidewalk, flagging, curbstone, and air shafts, areaways, backyards, courts, parking lots, and alleys free from litter. So in conjunction with the town, we would hope that all property owners and their tenants will be responsible in helping the town stay gorgeous by removing the litter that accumulates in front of their properties. Lastly, I want to let the public know that move over, it's the law. You see sirens and lights, move to the right. Yield to the green, yield to the blue lights. These are all volunteers and emergency workers trying to get to an accident. Next time they respond, it might be your life. So please respect our EMS and our volunteers, yield to them and move over. It's not just your duty, but it's the law. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Kate, you have a
Yes, good reminder.
Absolutely,
that is a good
especially
one.
now when we're getting into our busy season and there's already, enough traffic on the road to delay ambulances going to the hospital.
Thank you, Peter. I have an update from the zoning code working group. We're near the end and we're finishing up with the purposes of zoning. That's chapter 255-111. We are not meeting this Monday, and the presentation plan for initially planned for June 20th will take place on July 11th. Also on June 20th, the Litter Action Committee will present to us the work session with an update on the results of their No Spring Fling efforts. Also, further to what David said, I'd just like to remind folks that have takeout establishments, that they are meant to also have a receptacle for litter from all the takeout debris. So I ask folks to please make sure that they have that receptacle available to the public. I met with the Energy Sustainability Committee met yesterday, and we had a presentation of an outline and an overview from the energy roadmap update that is being completed by the consultants. It was, again, an outline and an overview. There's still revisions and work going on to the draft before it's presented to us and to the public. They also worked on their 3 recommendations that they are presenting to the town board. The first recommendation is on electrification, and that is for basically electrifying all new construction so that we reduce our fossil fuel use. As you know, the state has passed their electrification legislation, and they will have legislation going into effect for having electrification, heat pumps, etc., to be net zero and eliminating fossil fuels from heating, cooling, and other appliances in the house. That will take place by 2026 with a list of exemptions. The Energy Sustainability Committee continues to work on their recommendation that they'll further bring to the town board that will mirror somewhat to the state legislation. Also expanding the leaf blower ban or adjusting the time periods, as we know, September 20th, no leaves are coming down from our trees, with an eventual work towards phasing out gas-powered leaf blowers completely, and also are working on sending us a letter on recommending expedient implementation of the CCA legislation that we have passed in the town, with an overview of how the hurdles have been overcome.
And for those who may not know, CCA is Community Choice Aggregation.
That's right. So offering the community a way to purchase clean, renewable energy rather than fossil fuel produced energy. And that is in the form of an opt-out program. The town board passed the legislation for implementing it, and the holdup has been between LIPA and the state regulations on that. And that's what I have.
Thank you, Kate. On Saturday, we had our 375th anniversary history fair right here at Town Hall. It was very well attended, and I think overall quite a success. Ye Old Supervisor was there with his powdered wig and knickers, and we had a number of participants. I think the highlight for me was the different school groups that came. We had the Spring School, Amagansett School, John Marshall, East Hampton Middle School, Montauk School, High School, Sag Harbor Elementary. We also had Eastville Historical Society, Springs Historical Society, Ashwa Hall, Wainscott Heritage Project, Amagansett Library, Montauk Library, East Hampton Library, East Hampton Historical Farm Museum, East Hampton Town Aquaculture Department. Barley brought his touch tank with aquatic creatures for kids to learn about, and the East Hampton Historical Society. We had our town historian, Hugh King, ask the town historian questions about history. He was donning his town crier top hat and vest. We had members of the Latino community, the VFW, town trustees, Guild Hall, Amagansett Village Improvement Society, East Hampton Buildings and Grounds did a great job. I want a special thank you to Tony Littman, Richard Webb, and Barry Bennett and Valon Mosley for helping to move and set up both the tables and the stage, and bringing electric out for the event. A very special thank you to Joanne Pilgrim and Ann Bell in my office for all the work they did helping to organize the event. There were a lot of activities for children and families to do. We had a history scavenger hunt, historical Mad Libs and a lot of other things. We also had local musicians, Joe Potter and Friends, Mike Rosinski, Anthony Liberatore, our very own Chelsea Walker, who I'm beginning to think that council member Kathy Burke-Gonzalez and David Lease actually interview people based on their ability to sing, because they've had 2 of the last 3 administrative assistants have absolutely stunning voices, and it was really a pleasure to hear Chelsea sing. So it was a great event. I also had the pleasure of unveiling the town's logo for the historic anniversary with Kathy and Kate. And I don't know if you can see this here, LTV, if you can zoom in at all, but this logo was designed by local artist Scott Bludorn after we saw it responded.
We can see it perfectly fine.
Excellent. So this logo, I think, incorporates much of the iconography of East Hampton and its history, both past and present. You can see the large windmill in the center, farm fields, home sweet home, whales, ships, and in the distance, offshore, renewable energy source.
There you go.
Wind farm.
That's great.
So anyway, this is, and it's, I don't really see the colors quite so well on TV, but it's quite beautiful. We thank Scott for that. And you'll see that on all of the publications regarding our historical celebration throughout the year, which will culminate on the 23rd of September with a parade from the Hook Mill to the high school. So we're looking forward to that. And then the following weekend, the East Hampton Historical Society will be having their history festival as well. We were also blessed by very great weather this weekend. And speaking of being blessed, it was the blessing of the fleet yesterday afternoon.
Sunday,
excuse me. Yesterday was something else.
Day.
Well, I actually took the day off because I worked all weekend, so I took Monday off this week. But the Blessing of the Fleet annual event, which is both a somber and celebratory event, it commemorates to memory those who have passed during the year. So those who were remembered laid wreaths. We had from St. Therese, Father Liam was there, Reverend Bill Hoffman from Montauk Community Church, Cantor Deborah Stein, and Reverend Ben Shambaugh, the new rector at St. Luke's East Hampton, were there to officiate and preside and bless the fleet as they pulled by. And there were only, I think, 3 collisions with the blessing boat at this event. The Amagansett CAC was last night. They had questions about Cranberry Hole Bridge. Happy that it was back in use again. And a big thank you to the Highway Department for getting that done. But questions remained as to who owns the bridge and who's responsible for the structure of the bridge. My understanding is that it's the MTA that owns the bridge and is ultimately responsible for the structure, and that the town highway department maintains the road surface on that bridge. There's some interesting history surrounding the bridge, but I know that there are longer term concerns about the usefulness ongoing with the old wood framed structure. There were also concerns voiced about the fire load due to the southern pine beetle destruction of the pines along the Napeague stretch. The vast majority of those pines now, I think, are dead and dying, and I expect the remaining living ones won't probably be infected before the end of the year. Given the Canadian wildfires, we know that we're experiencing warmer and drier seasons now, most likely due to climate change. Having this potential fire load, which is the responsibility, and on state property, it's state roadway, state parklands, but the potential for a careless cigarette tossed on the side of the road or sparks emanating from the MTA rails due to a frozen brake or some other mechanical issue raised concerns. And, I know that Michael Chinque, who is on the CAC and a member of the Amagansett Fire Department, that the departments discussed that, the local chiefs have been discussing that internally. And, I would like to have their voices added to ours in seeking a plan from the state as to how to alleviate or mitigate those concerns about wildfire, because there's really, I think, dangerous potential here. We had reached out to the state early on when our Natural Resources Department identified that southern pine beetles had appeared and an infestation had started there. They did not respond by trying to suppress the infection of the beetles. And now it's, full-blown lost cause, really. And so there's this huge fire load all at once, but the ability of local departments to respond if there was a wildfire there are, seriously being questioned, given the resources involved and the equipment that would be necessary to fight a fire of that type without any fire breaks, fire roads. Again, it's basically dune land, so you have very sandy soils and undulating terrain with lots of obstacles. So I think that's something we should continue to press the state to address.
So can I ask you,
Sure.
Peter, because, obviously there's other areas of town where we've lost, significant trees because of the southern pine beetles. Have you had conversations with our emergency preparedness group as far as for other areas of town
So
where,
yeah, I mean, there are concerns, I think, in all such areas that are impacted, but I think the biggest difference is that the forests are somewhat more varied elsewhere. I know, like in my neck of the woods, where in 2017, the first outbreak happened, and there were efforts to suppress it. So, that has evolved. It wasn't like all at once, all of this tinder available. So, people have removed dead trees. They've been felled in many cases. And I think, in those areas, the woods become wetter and there's still fire potential there, but there are more ways to access.
A lot of it's about keeping your fire roads open.
There are roads and driveways and whatnot that people can gain access, but where you have this huge, undeveloped, inaccessible area of fire load, that I think having a wildfire that you can't really address at all is concerning. That there's basically one road in and out of Montauk. The inability to reach people in Montauk and get them to and from the hospital if there were any kind of emergencies, accidents, et cetera. It all plays into that concern.
And what has the reception been when you've reached out to the officials in New York State?
So I actually reached out to Fred Thiel's office about a month ago. I necessarily didn't hear back from him, but just this past week I had a meeting with New York State DOT members, a cutting crew. They did some minor work on there. They were surveying the areas. Primary for the DOT is the safety of the road right of way in which the dead trees will collapse either onto public safety, pedestrian or automobiles. That's one of my major concerns right now. I understand the fire load also, but as we saw last year when an individual perished in a biking accident, that whole area was shut down for 5 hours and Montauk was non-accessible. And if we work together with the state parks, even town staff, but mostly state parks, to get this taken care of, I think there'll be a lot more ease in the individuals that live and work in Montauk. And I'll be honest, I told them, my wife and my child drive that daily, multiple times. So I think the state has to do a little bit more work than they have. And I'm hoping with the sign that I saw and met with them last week, that they're coming to the realization they have to expend more resources out here to take care of this. It's not when, it's an if. It's not if, it's when. They're falling already. There's been call outs for trees gone down in the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, and I think that's what the DOT's prioritized, as you said, David, issues with the highway safety there, trees starting to fall. And that's a huge task in and of itself, but does not really address the larger question of potential wildfire and fire load. I don't know if the state has done any planning yet. We haven't really heard anything back regarding that from the initial outbreak right on through. So I don't know if they have a plan, but they need to respond, I think, to us. And I think adding the voices of local fire commissioners along with the town, putting them on notice that we see a serious potential threat here is important to do and to try and get some movement. I don't personally know what the solution would be there, but certainly have a response plan in place to how to deal with that, and the resources, identified and available should it occur is really important ahead of any problem. Other things that were discussed was the lighting district next steps. On Thursday, we'll have a notice of public hearing for the expenses.
Excuse me.
Expense to the lighting district for the feasibility study for the historic lighting and potential undergrounding of utilities along the corridor in Amagansett on 27 from Indian Wells Highway to Atlantic Avenue. They're interested to see that go forward. There was also a discussion about the zoning group that you formed, Kate, and some questions about why wouldn't the town consider a moratorium, or at least a moratorium on houses over a certain size. So that was brought up and discussed briefly. The meeting also included continuing discussion of 555 and request that the town board consider amending the proposed management plan for 555 to incorporate their suggestions, and if and when a draft reflecting those amendments would occur, whether the town board would move forward with public hearing with the draft management plan as initially proposed, and what kind of timeline there might be for that. And that's what I have. We have a few resolutions to approve today.
We do, starting with Resolution 2023-864 is to accept a proposal of services for plans and specification review for the Montauk Playhouse Community Center Aquatic Center, and this will be done by LK McLean Associates at a cost not to exceed $12,800.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, passed and carried.
Offer Resolution 2023-865 is appoint seasonal lifeguards for June 2023. This is going to be effective retroactive to the starting dates listed below through September 16, 2023 for Steve McMahon and Daniel Sarlo.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, passed and carried.
866, appoint seasonal lifeguards 2023. Effective the dates indicated below through September 16, 2023 for Jack Zeimer, Cassidy Brabant, and Lauren Martinez.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, passed and carried.
867, the appoint seasonal employee in the recreational department, effective June 18th, 2023, my good friend Douglas Huck. I see, Doug's a great guy. I don't know if you know Doug. He's a really, really nice guy. $21 an hour. Oh, sorry. And there's more people on the backside of it and others. All my good friends, Tasha, Melissa, Timothy Treadwell, Mason Jefferson, Jocelyn Johnson Stevens, Lauren O'Loughlin, and Julia Liebman at the positions and salaries below.
You're just a friendly guy, David. Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, pass and carry.
868 is appoint seasonal recreation specialist William Hartwell, effective June 18, 2023, for recreational specialists at $30.11 an hour.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, pass and carry.
869 is appoint seasonal park attendant in the recreational department. When Triton Nywin was appointed groundskeeper 1 and Parks Department effective May 15th. Resolved that groundskeeper's 1 appointment will end on June 17th, 2023, and will be hereby appointed a seasonal positional park attendant for the hourly rate of $21 effective June 18th, 2023.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, pass carried.
870 is a budget modification for land management, bringing $12,000 from 2 health insurance lines to tree maintenance in the amount of $12,000.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, pass carried.
871 is amend resolution 2023-266 consulting fees for H2M specified budget line. This is for prepare the map and plan for the wastewater collection system for downtown Montauk. And they were approved and contracted by resolution 266. This is for time materials, memorandums, and other materials not to exceed $30,000.
I think that's 30.
I said $30,000.
30,000. Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Pass carried. Resolution 872 is a budget modification for insurance, and this is for new vehicles, equipment, and deductibles for claims, and it's moving from health insurance in the amount of $50,000 from one line, longevity in the amount of $20,000. Health insurance in the amount of 25, health insurance again for 15,000, health insurance from an additional line for 65,000, 75,000 and 30,000, and moving them to insurance in the amount of 50,000, in the amount of 125,000, in the amount of 75,000, and in the amount of 30,000.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, passed and carried.
And resolution 2023-873 is to appoint part-time senior airport attendant Dana Brancato at the hourly rate of $30.84, effective retroactive to June 8th, 2023.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passed and carried.
874 is to appoint assistant cook in human services. This is Rudolph DeSanti Jr. to the full-time position of assistant cook for 40-hour work week at the annual rate of $50,466.21.
Second.
All in favor? I just want to mention that that reminded me that at ACAC, one of the participants had recognized that his name had come up for cook at the senior center, and it seemed to spur more interest in participating in the nutrition program, and they were excited to see that he was going to be a cook there. And all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, passed and carried.
875 is a payout upon resignation for Linda Welch. Linda was an assessment clerk who resigned from her full-time employment effective May 20th, 2023, and audited time records for vacation, compensatory, prorated longevity, and healthcare were reviewed, and Linda will receive a payout of a gross total of $2,178.32.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, passed and carried. Resolution 876 to authorize clearing allowance for a town sign, and this is at the property of 581 Wainscott Northwest Road, where the town has installed and maintained a sign which encroaches somewhat on the property. And this is for surveying to allow for that area to be properly identified and excluded from the clearing of that property with regard to any uses there.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, passed and carried.
I'd like to make a motion to go into exec session to discuss CPF personnel advice of counsel. And I don't know if there was anything else that was added last minute.
I think we might have one of contracts. So we put contracts on there?
Contracts.
Yeah, just.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, passed, carried. Shall we reconvene at 2:15?
Works for me.
Fine.
We'll send a link. Thank you very much, everyone.